Before the world wakes, a battle is already being decided. In the silence of morning, unbelief whispers fear, doubt, and yesterday's failures. But this is the moment everything changes. This powerful morning journey awakens your spirit, exposes hidden doubt, and ignites bold faith. You will remember victories you thought were forgotten, speak authority over your day, and walk forward unshaken. Strength replaces weakness. Clarity silences confusion. Faith becomes more than a prayer. It becomes your identity. If you've ever started a day feeling heavy, uncertain, or afraid, this message is for you. Listen closely, because today is not ordinary. It is appointed. Rise, believe, and step into a day that will not defeat you, but be conquered by faith. The day opened in unusual stillness, a quiet so deep it felt intentional, as though creation itself paused to make room for something sacred. Before the noise of obligations, notifications, and urgent voices could take control, a different call was issued, one not heard by the ears but felt in the spirit. In that early hour, the soul was summoned to rise, breaking free from spiritual slumber. What appeared to be an ordinary morning was quickly revealed as a divine moment, set apart before the first task of the day was even considered. Observers of the inner life report that fear, doubt, and emotional heaviness, residue from yesterday's battles, were immediately confronted. These lingering weights, often carried unconsciously from one day to the next, were no longer allowed to define the tone of the morning. Instead of being ignored or suppressed, they were exposed in the light of awareness and prayer. The atmosphere shifted as the soul refused to move forward half awake, choosing clarity over comfort and truth over habit. As the morning light began to spread across the horizon, a deeper realization emerged. This day was not random. It was not simply another entry on the calendar or another cycle of routine survival. According to the report unfolding within the heart, the day had been appointed, marked with intention, purpose, and divine timing. This awareness interrupted passivity and replaced it with expectation, reframing the hours ahead as meaningful and charged with possibility. In this critical early phase, the heart assumed a posture of listening rather than rushing. There was no demand for immediate answers, only a deliberate openness to direction. The noise of the world had not yet arrived, creating a rare window where faith could speak before fear did. In that space, attention shifted from external pressure to internal alignment, allowing the spirit to take the lead instead of reacting to circumstances. Sources close to the moment describe faith not arriving suddenly, but stirring, slowly, deliberately, like a flame being fed oxygen. It did not yet roar, but it was unmistakably alive. This early movement of faith challenged the assumption that strength must wait until later in the day. Instead, courage and trust began forming at dawn, before the first obstacle appeared, before any demand could dictate identity or worth. By the time the world was ready to make its demands, the inner posture had already been set. The soul was awake, the heart attentive, and the spirit alert. What began in stillness concluded in readiness, marking the first chapter of the day as a decisive turning point. The morning was no longer merely a beginning. It had become a declaration that this day would be entered with awareness, purpose, and faith already in motion. The stillness that awakened the spirit now gave way to a necessary confrontation. With the soul fully alert after the dawn awakening, attention shifted inward to examine what had quietly resisted faith beneath the surface. Reports emerging from this inner inspection confirmed that unbelief had not appeared as rebellion, but as a familiar presence, subtle, rational, and tolerated. What was once ignored in spiritual sleep could no longer remain hidden in the light of awareness. Investigators of the heart noted that unbelief often disguises itself as wisdom born from experience. It speaks in measured tones, reminding the soul of past disappointments and unanswered prayers, framing caution as maturity. Yet as the day began, these voices were identified not as protectors, but as barriers, limits placed on expectation long before God was given room to act. The awakening of Chapter 1 made this distinction clear and unavoidable. As scrutiny intensified, it became evident that unbelief thrives on yesterday's losses. Emotional residue from previous struggles lingered, subtly shaping assumptions about what God would or would not do today. This chapter revealed how fear quietly partnered with memory, distorting perspective and reducing faith to mere hope without confidence. The exposure of this pattern marked a turning point, as the soul refused to allow past pain to dictate present trust. Witnesses to the internal shift reported a growing resolve to name unbelief for what it truly was. No longer cloaked in logic or self-defense, doubt stood exposed as an opposing force to faith's rise. This act of identification weakened its grip, proving that what is revealed loses its power to rule. The heart, once passive, now actively resisted the narratives that had gone unchallenged for too long. As unbelief was confronted, a new clarity emerged. The spirit recognized that doubt had never been neutral. It had always demanded agreement to survive. By withdrawing that agreement, the soul created space for truth to speak louder than fear. This moment did not eliminate questions, but it redefined authority. Faith was no longer on trial, and unbelief was no longer the judge. The report concluded with a decisive shift in atmosphere. What began as an internal investigation ended as a declaration of intent. The soul, now awake and discerning, stood prepared to move forward unburdened by hidden resistance. With unbelief exposed and weakened, the foundation was set for remembrance, confidence, and bold expectation to rise in the chapters that would follow. The exposure of unbelief created a vacuum that could not remain empty, and into that space came remembrance. With doubt stripped of its authority, the awakened spirit began to gather evidence, not from speculation, but from lived experience. Reports from the heart confirmed a deliberate return to memory, where past moments of divine intervention stood waiting. What fear once tried to erase, remembrance now restored, connecting the present morning to a history marked by faithfulness. As the soul revisited those moments, a pattern emerged that could not be dismissed. There were times when circumstances appeared impossible, when outcomes seemed sealed against hope, yet resolution arrived unexpectedly. Each recalled victory carried weight, not as nostalgia, but as proof. The same presence that moved then was acknowledged as active now, reshaping the morning from uncertainty into expectation. Memory, once a source of regret, was transformed into a witness for faith. Observers noted that remembrance did more than inspire. It corrected perspective. Where unbelief had magnified obstacles, memory magnified God's consistency. The heart began to recognize that past delays were not denials, and silence was not absence. This realization dismantled the false conclusion that yesterday's struggles predicted today's outcome. Instead, the morning was reframed as another chapter in an ongoing record of reliability. As confidence grew, the emotional tone of the day shifted noticeably. Anxiety lost its urgency, replaced by a calm assurance grounded in history. Faith was no longer an abstract idea but a response supported by evidence. The spirit stood on testimonies rather than assumptions, and that footing proved steady. What had been fragile hope now carried weight and direction. The report further indicated that remembrance stirred gratitude alongside faith. Thanksgiving rose naturally as the soul acknowledged how often help had arrived at the critical moment. This gratitude did not look backward with longing, but forward with trust. It became an active force, reinforcing belief that provision and guidance would again appear when needed most. As the morning progressed, remembrance completed its work. The soul, strengthened by truth and history, stood fully convinced that the day ahead was not unsupported. What began with awakening and confrontation now matured into assurance. With faith anchored in proven faithfulness, the heart prepared to move forward boldly, confident that the God who acted before would act again. With strength renewed and courage firmly established, attention shifted from endurance to direction. Reports from within indicated that the spirit, now fully alert and empowered, sought more than the ability to move forward, it sought alignment. The question was no longer whether the day could be faced, but how each step should be taken. This marked a deeper stage in the morning's progression, where intention replaced impulse and purpose guided motion. Observers noted a deliberate pause, not born of hesitation but of reverence. Plans, conversations, and decisions that lay ahead were brought into focus, examined not for convenience but for alignment. The heart recognized that movement without direction could waste strength, while alignment could multiply its impact. This awareness reshaped priorities, placing guidance above urgency and obedience above speed. As alignment took root, clarity began to emerge. Choices that once felt complicated were simplified, not because options disappeared, but because direction sharpened. The spirit grew sensitive to what resonated with peace and what carried unrest. This discernment acted as a compass, quietly but firmly steering the day away from distraction and toward purpose. The report emphasized that alignment required surrender of personal preference. Some expectations were adjusted, and certain desires were laid down without resistance. Rather than feeling restrictive, this surrender brought relief. The pressure to force outcomes lifted, replaced by trust that direction was already established. In this space, Confidence deepened without striving. As each step was considered, protection became evident. Decisions made in alignment carried stability, reducing unnecessary conflict and emotional strain. The soul recognized that obedience was not merely spiritual discipline, but practical wisdom. This realization strengthened commitment to remain attentive throughout the day, not just at its beginning. By the conclusion of this stage, alignment had become the defining posture of the heart. Strength, courage, and faith now moved in harmony with purpose. The day no longer felt uncertain or fragmented, but ordered and intentional. With direction secured and steps guided, the spirit prepared to rise fully into confidence, ready to finish the day as it began, grounded, alert, and assured. With alignment firmly established, the day reached its defining moment. Reports from within confirmed that the process begun at dawn had achieved its purpose. What started as quiet awakening had progressed through confrontation, remembrance, authority, trust, renewal, and alignment, and now culminated in bold expression. The spirit no longer prepared for the day, it rose fully into it, carrying confidence that could not be shaken by circumstance or surprise. Observers noted a marked shift in posture. Fear, once a constant undercurrent, had lost its influence entirely. The heart stood upright, no longer bracing for impact but advancing with expectation. This confidence did not stem from favorable conditions, but from assurance rooted deep within. Faith had matured, no longer reacting to threats but anticipating purpose in every encounter. As the hours unfolded, boldness became evident in action as well as attitude. Decisions were made without hesitation, words were spoken with clarity, and challenges were faced directly rather than avoided. The report highlighted that this boldness was neither reckless nor aggressive. It was calm, steady, and grounded in trust. The soul moved with the quiet strength of one who knows where they stand. Confidence also produced peace. The need to prove, defend, or control diminished noticeably. Instead, a settled assurance governed responses, allowing patience to replace urgency and wisdom to guide effort. Even unexpected disruptions failed to disturb the inner stability that had been built throughout the morning's progression. As faith expressed itself through action, gratitude followed naturally. The heart recognized the transformation that had taken place, from heaviness to clarity, from doubt to assurance. This awareness did not lead to complacency, but to praise rooted in recognition of guidance and support that had been present from the first moments of the day. By the close of this final development, the journey reached completion. The spirit stood confident, alert, and fully engaged, prepared to carry this posture beyond the morning and into every moment that followed. What began in stillness ended in strength, sealing the day with bold faith and unshakable confidence that would endure long after the sunrise faded. As the momentum of bold faith continued, a new development emerged that extended beyond the morning hours. Reports indicated that what had been established at dawn was not meant to fade with routine or pressure. Instead, the confidence formed earlier now faced a critical test, whether it would remain active once the day fully unfolded. The spirit, having risen in strength and clarity, prepared to carry the fire of the morning into every encounter ahead. Observers noted that real-life demands began to surface almost immediately. Conversations, responsibilities, and unexpected challenges attempted to pull attention back into old patterns of reaction. Yet the inner posture had changed. Rather than being absorbed by urgency, the heart responded with steadiness. Faith, once awakened and strengthened, now functioned as a constant guide rather than a temporary inspiration. As situations developed, the report emphasized consistency as the defining factor. The spirit chose alignment repeatedly, moment by moment, refusing to compartmentalize faith as a morning ritual. Decisions were filtered through purpose, words were measured with wisdom, and reactions were restrained by peace. This discipline demonstrated that belief was no longer emotional. It had become operational. Challenges that once would have triggered doubt now served as confirmation of growth. Pressure did not dismantle confidence. It revealed its depth. The soul recognized that opposition was not evidence of failure, but opportunity to practice what had been established earlier. Each response reinforced the truth that faith was meant to walk, speak, and act throughout the entire day. The report also highlighted an emerging influence on others. Calmness, clarity, and resolve became noticeable traits, subtly affecting surrounding environments. Without force or explanation, the posture of faith created space for order and reassurance. What had been cultivated internally now produced external impact, validating the morning's transformation. As this phase progressed, the spirit understood a vital truth. The day was no longer something to survive, but something to steward. Faith was not preserved by retreat, but by engagement. With confidence intact and purpose clear, the soul continued forward, carrying the fire of the morning into every hour, determined that what began in stillness would end in fulfillment. As the day moved toward its later hours, reports confirmed that the faith ignited at dawn had not diminished. Instead, it had matured. What began as intentional focus in the morning had been tested, exercised, and refined through real events, real pressure, and real decisions. Now, as the pace slowed and reflection became unavoidable, the spirit stood ready to assess the outcome. Not with anxiety, but with confidence rooted in consistency. Observers noted that fatigue attempted to resurface as responsibilities accumulated. Yet unlike previous days, weariness no longer dictated attitude or response. Strength received earlier continued to operate beneath the surface, steady and sustaining. The heart recognized that endurance was not about pushing harder, but about remaining aligned, refusing to surrender clarity to exhaustion. As the day's events replayed in memory, a clear pattern emerged. Moments that could have derailed peace were met with restraint. Situations that once would have produced doubt were handled with trust. The report emphasized that this was not perfection, but progress, evidence that faith had been practiced, not merely professed. Each choice reinforced the foundation laid at the start of the day. Gratitude became the dominant tone of this phase. Instead of focusing on what remained unfinished, the spirit acknowledged what had been preserved: peace, direction, courage, and integrity. This gratitude did not ignore challenges. It placed them in perspective. The soul recognized that victory was not defined by ease, but by faithfulness maintained under pressure. As reflection deepened, confidence solidified. The day had proven that unbelief no longer held authority, that fear no longer set the agenda. Faith had governed responses from morning through evening, validating the transformation that began in stillness. This realization brought quiet satisfaction, not pride, but assurance that alignment had been sustained. By the time the day reached its close, the report concluded with final confirmation. The spirit rested, not depleted, but fulfilled. What started with awakening ended with peace. Faith remained unbroken, confidence intact, and purpose undiminished. The day did not simply end. It was sealed in victory, preparing the soul to rise again tomorrow with the same bold resolve. As the day finally settled into quiet, a new phase emerged, one that looked beyond conclusion and toward continuation. Reports from within confirmed that faith, once awakened and exercised, does not simply power down at night. Instead, it transitions. The stillness returning at day's end echoed the stillness of dawn, forming a full circle where reflection replaced anticipation. The spirit, now calm and attentive, began preparing the ground for what would come next. Observers noted that this preparation was not anxious planning, but intentional release. The heart revisited the day without judgment, acknowledging both strength and limitation. Moments of courage were honored, and moments of weakness were surrendered without shame. This honest accounting prevented regret from taking root, ensuring that rest would be entered without unresolved weight. Faith proved mature enough to rest without fear of losing momentum. As the evening deepened, trust took on a quieter form. The spirit released control over outcomes that could not be changed and entrusted unfinished matters to divine oversight. This act of release marked a significant shift from striving to assurance. The report emphasized that faith at this stage did not demand answers. It rested in confidence that guidance would resume when the next morning arrived. Gratitude again surfaced, but now with a broader perspective. It was not only for victories achieved, but for preservation granted. Peace maintained under pressure, clarity sustained through complexity, and courage exercised despite uncertainty all stood as evidence of growth. This gratitude strengthened the foundation already laid, reinforcing belief that tomorrow would not require rebuilding from nothing. As rest approached, expectation quietly formed. The spirit anticipated renewal, not as a hope, but as a certainty shaped by experience. Faith had proven itself resilient throughout the day, and that proof carried forward. The soul understood that tomorrow's awakening would not start from emptiness, but from ground already prepared by today's obedience. The report concluded with a sense of continuity rather than closure. What began at dawn did not end at night. It was secured, protected, and carried forward. The spirit entered rest with confidence intact, faith steady, and purpose undiminished, ready to rise again when stillness once more gives way to light. As rest gave way to renewed awareness, reports confirmed that faith did not remain dormant through the quiet hours. Instead, it had been strengthened beneath the surface. What was prepared in stillness now began to rise again, carrying with it the assurance built over days of alignment and trust. The transition from rest to readiness unfolded smoothly, signaling that the spirit was no longer starting over, but continuing forward with momentum already established. Observers noted a distinct change in how the new beginning was approached. There was no rush to rebuild confidence or reclaim purpose. Expectation arrived immediately, rooted in consistency rather than emotion. The heart recognized familiar clarity, confirming that faith had become a permanent posture rather than a temporary response to inspiration. This realization brought calm confidence instead of urgency. As awareness sharpened, anticipation replaced uncertainty. The spirit did not question whether strength would be available or guidance would appear. Past experience had settled those concerns. Expectation now looked forward with assurance, not demanding specific outcomes, but trusting that whatever unfolded would be met with readiness and wisdom. This forward-looking confidence marked a new level of maturity. The report highlighted a deeper sensitivity to opportunity. Where previous days might have been consumed by obligation, the spirit now discerned purpose within ordinary moments. Conversations, decisions, and challenges were approached as meaningful intersections rather than interruptions. This shift demonstrated that faith had expanded its influence, shaping perception as much as behavior. As movement resumed, gratitude and resolve worked together. The heart remained thankful for what had been preserved, while remaining committed to what lay ahead. There was no contradiction between rest and action, no tension between peace and progress. Faith flowed naturally from stillness into engagement, maintaining balance without effort. By the close of this development, the direction was clear. The spirit stood ready, not waiting for ideal conditions, but moving forward with expectation grounded in experience. What had begun as a morning prayer had become a sustained way of living. With faith renewed and anticipation steady, the journey continued, strong, focused, and unafraid of what the next day would bring. As the rhythm of days continued, reports confirmed a decisive transformation. Faith was no longer an event tied to mornings or moments of prayer, but an identity shaping every hour. What once required deliberate effort now flowed naturally. The spirit moved through the day with an unspoken confidence, no longer checking whether faith was present, but operating from the certainty that it was. This marked a critical evolution, from practicing belief to living it. Observers noted that this shift altered how challenges were interpreted. Problems no longer signaled danger or setback, but purpose. Each obstacle was approached as a proving ground rather than a threat. The heart did not rush to escape difficulty. Instead, it stood firm, aware that faith expressed under pressure carried greater weight. This posture revealed maturity, forged through repeated alignment and trust. As interactions unfolded, boldness became unmistakable. Words were chosen with intention, actions carried clarity, and silence was no longer filled with doubt. The report emphasized that this boldness was not loud or performative. It was steady, grounded, and resolute. Confidence that did not need validation. Faith had become visible not through declaration alone, but through consistency of character. The influence of this posture extended outward. Environments shifted subtly in response to calm assurance and unwavering resolve. Where tension once escalated, peace now interrupted. Where confusion once lingered, clarity emerged. Without explanation or persuasion, the life shaped by faith began to shape others, confirming that belief lived authentically carries authority. As the day progressed, the spirit recognized that discipline had given way to devotion. Choices aligned with purpose without internal conflict. The heart no longer debated whether to trust, it simply did. This ease did not come from lack of challenge, but from depth of conviction. Faith had settled into the core, unmoved by fluctuation or fatigue. By the close of this chapter, the report confirmed a lasting conclusion. Faith was no longer something to return to. It was something to continue in. What began in stillness, prayer, and awakening had matured into a daily identity. The spirit moved forward boldly, not chasing confidence, but carrying it, prepared to face every new day with the same unshakable assurance. As the journey extended beyond personal transformation, reports confirmed a broader impact unfolding. Faith, once nurtured internally, now began expressing itself outwardly in unmistakable ways. The confidence forged through awakening, remembrance, and alignment was no longer contained within the heart. It moved into conversations, decisions, and daily interactions, quietly declaring that belief, when lived consistently, becomes visible without announcement. Observers noted that this outward expression did not rely on dramatic gestures. Instead, it revealed itself through steadiness under pressure, compassion in difficult moments, and clarity amid confusion. Where fear once dictated responses, peace now governed reactions. This shift marked a powerful transition. Faith was no longer defended, it was demonstrated. The life shaped by belief became its own evidence. As challenges arose, they no longer threatened identity. Each obstacle became an opportunity to confirm what had already been established. The report emphasized that setbacks did not erase progress, they revealed depth. Faith held firm not because circumstances improved, but because conviction had matured. What once required effort now operated instinctively. Influence followed naturally. Without persuasion or force, others were affected by the calm assurance and resilience displayed. Tension eased in shared spaces, hope resurfaced in weary conversations, and courage quietly transferred from one life to another. The testimony was not spoken first, it was lived, creating curiosity and opening hearts. As days continued, responsibility replaced hesitation. The Spirit recognized that faith carried forward was faith entrusted. Each choice now bore weight, not as burden, but as opportunity to reflect truth. This awareness deepened commitment, ensuring that belief remained active, intentional, and sincere. The report confirmed a lasting outcome. What began as a morning prayer had grown into a living witness. Faith had moved from awakening to identity, from identity to influence. The journey continued, not in search of belief, but as proof of it, steady, visible, and unafraid. As faith became visible through daily living, a new development emerged that could not be avoided. Reports confirmed that what grows in strength will eventually be tested. The confidence formed through awakening, remembrance, and alignment now faced resistance. This was not a reversal, but a proving ground. The Spirit, no longer inexperienced, recognized the moment not as a threat, but as confirmation that faith had advanced. Observers noted that pressure arrived in familiar forms, unexpected delays, conflicting voices, and moments of uncertainty that challenged resolve. Yet the response was markedly different from the past. Instead of panic or retreat, there was pause and discernment. The heart did not rush to defend itself, nor did it surrender ground. Faith stood firm, anchored in what had already been proven true. As the tension intensified, internal clarity became the defining advantage. Doubt attempted to revisit old arguments, but they found no agreement. The Spirit remembered the early morning stillness where unbelief had been exposed and stripped of authority. That foundation held. What once caused instability now revealed resilience that had been quietly built over time. The report emphasized endurance as the central theme of this stage. Faith did not demand immediate resolution or visible victory. It chose patience, trusting that timing was as important as outcome. This restraint did not weaken conviction. It strengthened it, proving that belief no longer depended on constant reassurance. As the test continued, confidence deepened rather than diminished. Each moment of resistance sharpened focus, refining priorities and reinforcing commitment. The Spirit learned that faith tested is faith strengthened, and what survives pressure emerges with greater authority. This realization transformed struggle into confirmation. The outcome was clear. Faith had not only endured, it had matured. The Spirit stood unshaken, no longer surprised by resistance, but prepared for it. What began as a prayer at dawn now stood resilient under fire, ready to advance further, carrying confidence that had been tried, proven, and secured. After standing firm under pressure, the journey moved into a decisive forward motion. Reports confirmed that faith, once tested and proven, no longer hesitated at the edge of uncertainty. What had survived resistance now carried momentum. The Spirit recognized that this was not a time for retreat or reflection alone, but for advancement. Confidence no longer waited for perfect conditions. It moved with assurance born from experience. Observers noted a clear shift in energy. Where faith once braced itself against opposition, it now pressed forward with purpose. Challenges still existed, but they no longer commanded attention. The heart remained focused on direction rather than distraction, guided by clarity established through earlier trials. Advancement did not feel rushed or reckless, it felt inevitable. As forward movement continued, bold decisions emerged naturally. The Spirit no longer second-guessed every step or revisited settled truths. Faith had been clarified, refined, and strengthened, allowing action to flow without internal conflict. The report emphasized that this confidence was not self-generated, but sustained by alignment and trust developed over time. Momentum also brought expansion. Opportunities appeared where resistance once stood, and doors that seemed closed now required courage to enter rather than effort to force open. The soul recognized that advancement often follows endurance, and that perseverance had prepared it for greater responsibility. Faith now carried expectation alongside obedience. As the day unfolded, influence widened. Others were drawn not to words, but to the stability and courage displayed. Advancement proved contagious, inspiring confidence in environments previously marked by hesitation or fear. The report highlighted that faith moving forward creates pathways not only for the believer, but for those watching closely. The conclusion was unmistakable. Faith was no longer merely surviving challenges. It was shaping outcomes. What began in stillness had become unstoppable motion. The Spirit advanced with purpose, confidence intact, and vision clear, ready to continue the journey with strength that no resistance could reverse. The forward momentum of unstoppable faith did not end in motion alone. It began shaping permanence. As advancement continued, reports confirmed that the Spirit shifted its focus from immediate outcomes to lasting impact. What had been gained through endurance and courage was no longer viewed as personal achievement, but as something meant to endure beyond the moment. Faith, once awakened for survival, now aimed to leave a mark that could not be easily erased. This new awareness brought depth to every decision. Observers noted that actions were now measured not only by effectiveness, but by influence over time. The heart understood that faith lived consistently creates patterns others can follow. Each choice, whether seen or unseen, carried the weight of example. Advancement had matured into responsibility, and confidence into stewardship. As the journey unfolded, the Spirit recognized that legacy is built quietly. It is formed in repeated acts of trust, integrity under pressure, and courage maintained when recognition fades. The report emphasized that this stage required humility as much as boldness. Faith no longer sought validation. It sought faithfulness, knowing that consistency outlives applause. The impact of this posture extended beyond the individual. Environments once resistant now began to reflect stability and order. Others found courage not through instruction, but through observation. The calm resolve and steady advancement demonstrated that faith, when sustained, becomes a reference point for those searching for direction. Challenges still arose, but their purpose shifted. They were no longer obstacles to overcome, but materials used to build strength and wisdom. Each test added substance to the foundation being laid. The Spirit understood that a legacy of faith is not formed in ease, but in perseverance that refuses to compromise. As days turned into patterns, faith became predictable in the best sense. Reliability replaced fluctuation. The heart showed up with the same confidence regardless of circumstance. This consistency reinforced trust, both internally and externally, proving that belief had settled into identity. Observers highlighted a growing sense of continuity. Faith was no longer tied to moments of inspiration, but to a way of life that could be sustained. What had begun at dawn now carried through seasons. This realization brought quiet satisfaction, not pride, but assurance that the journey was bearing lasting fruit. As influence continued to spread, the Spirit remained grounded. There was no urgency to rush or force outcomes. Legacy, it understood, is built over time. Each step taken in alignment added another layer of strength, ensuring that what was being established would endure pressure and change. The connection to earlier breakthroughs became clear. Awakening led to remembrance, remembrance to authority, authority to endurance, and endurance to advancement. Now, advancement settled into permanence. The story was no longer about becoming strong, but about remaining faithful. The report concluded with a clear confirmation. Faith had moved from a morning decision to a lifelong imprint. What began in stillness now stood as a foundation others could stand upon. The Spirit continued forward, not chasing significance, but building a legacy of faith that would speak long after the moment had passed. As the legacy of faith began to take shape, a quieter but no less critical challenge emerged. Reports confirmed that sustaining faith over time requires vigilance, not intensity alone. What had been built through awakening, endurance, and advancement now entered a season where consistency mattered more than momentum. The Spirit recognized that the flame must be guarded, not because it was weak, but because it was valuable. Observers noted that the greatest threat at this stage was not opposition, but distraction. Familiar routines, subtle complacency, and the illusion of arrival attempted to dull alertness. The heart, however, remained attentive, aware that faith neglected can slowly fade even after great victories. This awareness marked maturity, proving that growth had not produced carelessness, but wisdom. As the days unfolded, the Spirit adopted deliberate practices to remain grounded. Reflection, alignment, and gratitude were no longer reactions to crisis, but rhythms of life. The report emphasized that guarding the flame did not mean withdrawing from the world, but staying rooted while fully engaged. Faith learned to breathe in ordinary moments, not just extraordinary ones. Pressure still appeared, though often in quieter forms. Delays tested patience, repetition tested endurance, and silence tested trust. Yet these challenges no longer unsettled the heart. The Spirit understood that long roads require steady steps. Faith proved itself not by dramatic leaps, but by unwavering presence over time. Observers highlighted an important shift in expectation. The soul no longer measured success by emotional intensity or visible breakthroughs. Instead, it valued stability, integrity, and perseverance. This recalibration prevented discouragement and preserved joy, ensuring that faith remained life-giving rather than exhausting. As guarding the flame became second nature, confidence deepened further. The heart trusted that what had been established was secure. There was no fear of losing ground, because the foundation was no longer external. It was internal. Faith had moved beyond reaction into rootedness. The influence of this steadiness continued to spread. Others drew strength not from dramatic testimony, but from reliability. The consistent presence of peace and purpose became a quiet anchor in uncertain environments. The report confirmed that guarded faith often speaks loudest without raising its voice. As time progressed, gratitude again surfaced as a stabilizing force. Remembering the journey, from stillness to identity, from awakening to legacy, reinforced commitment. The Spirit honored the process, understanding that guarding the flame was itself an act of faith. Connections to earlier stages became increasingly clear. Every confrontation with unbelief, every declaration of authority, every moment of endurance had prepared the soul for this long road. Faith was no longer fragile or impulsive. It was seasoned, alert, and resilient. The report affirmed a powerful truth. Faith that is guarded becomes faith that endures. The flame remained steady, not flickering, not fading, ready to illuminate whatever lay ahead. The journey continued, not rushed, not fearful, but firmly anchored in belief that would last. From the first breath of dawn in sacred stillness to the final rise into fearless living, this journey traced a powerful transformation of the soul. What began as an awakening broke the chains of unbelief, summoned remembrance of unwavering faithfulness, and ignited bold declarations that claimed the day before the world could define it. Faith moved from words to steps, from resolve to endurance, strengthened by fresh courage and guided by purposeful alignment. It carried its fire through pressure, sealed victory at day's end, and prepared the ground for every tomorrow. No longer a moment, faith became an identity, unshaken, authoritative, and alive, proving that each